This is Lastica from UPLB. Thank you for having me. I'd like to introduce myself before my talk. I am a wildlife practitioner since I graduated in 1999 and worked for the Fauna and Flora International under their Philippines Biodiversity Conservation Programs. I joined the academe in 2008 under the Department of Veterinary Clinical Sciences, which I now head. I became a parent in 2016 to little Chip. I believe that we are all in the dark until we're not, and I'll explain that last line later. My topic is about conservation medicine. I know that Dr. Mill might be talking about zoonosis and the zoonosis program. But it's really important to put in conservation medicine as a part of the zoonosis program. We know that as veterinarians, it's important for us to understand the concept of One Health and the impact that we in the profession have in the future health of humans and animals. So we all know also that One Health is an interdisciplinary field that studies these relationships among animal health, human health, and environmental conditions. But what's its relationship to conservation medicine? Essentially, conservation medicine is One Health, but with a different focus. How is this so? It's because One Health originally started as conservation medicine. The concept was created by a couple of wildlife practitioners during the meeting of the Wildlife Conservation Society in Manhattan. And they recognized that there is a link between human, domestic animal, and wildlife health and the threat diseases poses to people, their food, economics, and the biodiversity essential to maintaining healthy environments, functioning ecosystems. So the focus of conservation medicine remains true to the original purpose of why One Health was created. And it's essentially conservation and biodiversity conservation and wildlife health. So if we talk about conservation medicine and One Health, it's really important to know that most of the topics regarding One Health have something to do with emerging infectious diseases or EIDs. So we already know what they are, and we're actually living in a wave of EIDs. We have ASF, we have the COVID pandemic, we have avian influenza. But do we know that the factors that drive these EIDs include political factors? I know that during undergraduate studies, we were told and we learned that the factors that drive diseases are three, right? So there's the pathogen, host, and environment. But if they are emerging and re-emerging, then there is a fourth factor called the political factor that will drive these diseases. And this is very important because all of these are interconnected. And a lack of political will or a poor social infrastructure ultimately drives these EIDs to infect more and more populations. EIDs are also classified according to how they spread. So there are those that are associated with spillovers or spillbacks. So what are these? These are pathogens that are so many, or hosts that are so many that they infect hosts that are similar to them in nearby areas. No? To make it simple, we call them spillover or spillback. There are pathogens also. There are EID groups that are directly related to human intervention. such as human encroachment or ecological manipulation, things like that. And these are called pathogen pollution. Another group of EIDs are those with no overt human or domestic animal involvement. And these might be related to weather or stochastic events, no, or unforeseen events like flooding or typhoons. We call this passive emergence. So, an example of passive emergence would be cryptosporidia or malaria that are associated with changes in weather or climate. Another example before, and this was used by the ZAC in 2000 when he created this, when he wrote this paper on EIDs, is chytrid. Chytrid fungus. It was discovered some years ago and it was thought to have emerged because of climate change. But further studies by Burns et al. In 2016 revealed that it's actually pathogen pollution. So the chytrid fungus was actually spread from Korea during the Korean War. And when the soldiers came home to their to their own countries, they brought the fungus with them. And chytrid caused the extinction of many amphibians around the world. The EIDs associated with spillover are tuberculosis and African swine fever in Africa. So we have to distinguish this because African swine fever in Africa is endemic in warthogs and can be transmitted by soft ticks and wild boar, which communed with domestic pigs that live near the forest edges in Africa. So we have to remember this because it's different from African swine fever in the Philippines. EIDs associated with pathogen pollution, on the other hand, are examples are Angiostrongylos cantonensis, the rat lungworm, which is an emerging infectious disease in humans as well that causes a eosinophilic meningitis in humans. Another example is Aspergillus. It's an emerging disease, especially with the wildlife trade. We're finding more and more Aspergillus cases, not only in raptors, which is like we all know it's endemic in raptors, but now we're finding it in cetaceans and other birds as well. And another example is ASF in the Philippines is associated with pathogen pollution. Because this disease would not have come to the Philippines without human intervention. ASF came to the Philippines because of trade, not because of anything. I just want to show you, because I love these photos, so I'll just show you the asper spores that we found in crested serpent eagle. So many spores, and yeah, I just love that photo. Sorry. Okay, so before we move on, let's define what ecological health means, because it's really important to know what is normal, which means what's healthy, and what's not normal, to differentiate it from the abnormal. So ecological health is, again, not merely the absence of disease, but it is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. That's health, right? So we define health as not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And in the same sense, ecological health should involve a host of things, no? Not just the living, but also non-living components should be healthy. Ecological health recognizes the relationship of human activity, ecological change, and health. It identifies human activity as a major impact on the health of the planet. It means that humans are major contributors to ecological health. And so now we know what ecological health is. Let's go to, that's the baseline, a healthy ecology. We compare it to an unhealthy ecosystem. So when an ecosystem is in distress, we call it ecological distress syndrome. And we all know that a syndrome is like a manifestation of several symptoms or signs. Yeah? And when we say ecological distress syndrome, it's a collection of these signs that an ecosystem or signaling that an ecosystem is being pushed to its limits. It precedes the transformation of an ecosystem into something less productive. So what are examples of a less productive ecosystem? It means that there is a loss of biological vitality, like when you don't produce as much food anymore, global toxification, climate change, and increased ecological footprint, result of our demands on the environment. So these EDS, or ecological distress syndrome, is precluded by EIDs. I'll just let that silence rest. I think it's really important to realize this because we as veterinarians are in a very important role, no, pivotal role in hopefully controlling EDS. So we need to fill the gaps. What do we know so far? We know that we are just no. We know so little. We almost know nothing. We know that our country at least has high biodiversity. We have high levels of threat to biodiversity. And our country is also very susceptible to climate change. We have poor social systems and we lack political will. And all of these contribute to our future in terms of, ecological health. So mag-quiz muna tayo. I'll give you like 10 seconds to tell me what this is. So siguro Dr. Clyde and Doc Rem can check who got more answers. So what is this animal? I just want to prove a point. How about this one? For those who got it, this is a Turkic hornbill. There are Turkic hornbills in Mindanao. How about this one? And this one? This is a Philippine trogon. This is some people say that the Ibong Adarna was patterned after the Philippine trogon. This one. And this, you have this in Mindanao. This is the Philippine deer or the brown deer. This. And this one, this is a hanging parrot or colasisi. This, so essentially there are two animals there. There's a human and okay, and this is giant horty pig. We'll accept wild pig, but we have 4 distinct endemic pig species. So we need to be specific. Next. Everyone would probably say turtle, but this is a Philippine forest turtle, Sibenrochiella latensis, found only in Palawan. So why did I say this? Why did I show you this? Because I know that most of you would have identified all the non-Filipino animals, and few of you would identify the Philippine animals. So what's essentially wrong here? We need to learn more about our species. It's very important because of all the threats to biodiversity and ecology. We might be losing species more than we know about them. Is this our reality? So are we doomed? Our reality right now concerning EIDs is that more new pathogens are associated with high areas of biodiversity and human-centered activity. Examples of these are Ebola, SARS, even COVID. Second, most human and livestock can infect wildlife. And this can include ASF, which caused die-offs in 3 areas of the Philippines already. 3 areas where Philippine warty pigs exist. So there was a die-off in Iligan, in Digos, and in the north in Abra. All Sus philippensis, a vulnerable species of wild pigs. They're vulnerable, which means they're not like top priority for conservation. So there is no conservation plan for them, and now they're the most likely to be extinct. Next is the focus of attention on human-centered One Health approaches tend to put wild animal health in the backseat. And the full severity of these outbreaks and their impacts are often overlooked and underestimated. So, yeah. So consequently, the involvement of conservationists with public health and veterinary sectors may be motivated by the need to minimize potentially harmful impacts on wildlife. Kasi may negative perception, no? More often, wildlife are looked at as harbingers of disease, no? So they end up killing these wildlife, instead of looking at them as like co-hosts or victims as well. So a case in point is one of the thesis I did with some undergraduate students was to look into poultry diseases, economically important poultry diseases in wildlife. So we looked at Philippine eagles in Davao. We looked at cetaceans. We looked at other raptors in rescue centers, and these are wild egrets that we trapped in Bulacan. And we saw that they tested positive, serologically for Marek's disease, had the lesions of Marek's in them. So a lot of them tested positive for Marek's and ILP, and all of them tested positive for and D. So it's yeah, that's the reality. Another reality is that ASF might extirpate all our extant wild pigs. So by wild pigs in our lifetime. Or ASF might become endemic because they've infected the wild pigs. No? So we still don't know where we are at this point. No? It's really important maybe to realize the research gaps here and maybe we can do something about it. So another reality is that we hardly know anything about our wildlife. We don't know baselines. We don't know what they have. For instance, this is my student Dana. She's doing a thesis on the Philippine eagles, looking at Philippine eagle parasites, and this mite that she found is a feather mite that was discovered in 2018. The Philippine eagle program has began way before this in the 80s. No? Before that, so it's really important right now to study our animals, Philippine wild, because it might be too late by the time we learn about these things about them. Things like as simple as blood values or parasites, even fecalysis of these animals. We don't know. We don't know what they have. So it's really important to know this now rather than later. Because if we're not careful, we might see extinctions in our lifetime. I know it's scary and it's bleak to say that, but it's something of a reality because right now we're living in an age of extinction. We haven't declared anything yet this year, but we might soon, especially because ASF is already here and bird flu is already here as well. So we might have to be more careful and we might have to fast track on those researches. And speaking of ASF, there are long-term effects of these diseases. And I'm just showing you a graph of the zoning status of ASF in February 2021. And if you see the red zones, those are the zones with ASF. And those are the zones where our Philippine warty pig occurs. So, and if you notice, there are long-term effects of these things because if our wildlife are affected and wildlife are very much in tune with their environment and the ecosystem because they evolve with their ecosystem, their decline would alter ecology altogether. And we can lose stuff like creation of different habitat conditions to provide biodiversity increase because pigs kind of aerate the soil, right? Seed and plant propagation, wildlife actually spread seeds across the forest. As for pigs, they reduce pest species and carrion because they eat carrion. And in the Philippines, they don't have actual predators, but they are source of protein for many humans. So we need to look at the interconnectivity of all of this. Luskin recommended all of this, but for me, the most important is interdisciplinary collaborations. And I think that's why we're here. That's why we're talking to you. Because we're really open for collaborations and being in UPLB, it is one of our thrusts to help everyone, to help Filipinos in finding out more ways to help the country. So are we at the 11th hour? And I think we are. No? And because we're here, what should we do? I believe, no, kanina I said we're all in the dark until we're not. And we can only be in the light if we understand that everything is connected, from the tree to the soil, to the rock, to the dog, to you. No, everything is connected. And we need to understand that sooner than later. The next point I want to share is, please don't believe anyone that tells you baliw na baliw sa research. Be proud that you are crazy about research. Mabaliw tayo sa research. Because this is what we need. We need data-based decision making. We need data to be able to decide properly. We need data to be able to make sound decisions on anything. Next is, for researchers, please don't waste your samples. There might be things that you don't know yet, but if you keep your samples, maybe later there are things that you can know more. If you're working on a specific part of an animal, for instance, don't throw away the other parts. Freeze them, put them in ethanol, or put them, even in formalin, although ethanol is preferable. But just so you can have samples with you for future researchers or for future studies. If you're working on wildlife, it's really important to preserve your samples, because who knows, it might be the last sample you might ever have. I've seen specimens of a described animal, and that was the last specimen they could find. So it's really important to keep those samples and, make sure they are preserved well so that other people can study them in the future. And lastly, let us not waste time. And this means that we should collaborate now. I think it's really important to make sure that we communicate properly, we communicate well, and just that we communicate. Doc Rem is here. You can get his details. And he can share with you my details. Clyde will take in questions. And if you're open to collaboration, we're here to collaborate. So that's my talk. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned something from me. And please don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions. Thank you very much and good day.